Welcome to the Call to Defend podcast, where Caleb is far too tired to be functioning.
Not ready for you to start. It's 10 p.m. I've been up since before 6. Leave me alone.
Yeah. Again, we welcome you to the recording where we probably have found Caleb at his tiredest. And of all the recordings we've done, we finally have done it. Until next time.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
So this is going to be a fun one. It's going to be nice and short. There's so much that could be said because there's so many passages to go through. But we're just kind of do like I think we were saying somewhere between 2 to 4 episodes, probably more like the 3-episode range of the biblical concept of joy. Ignore Caleb yawning right now. It's totally fine. He's totally going to function perfectly fine.
It's going to happen a lot.
Yeah. And so this will be a fun one. What we're going to be doing is usually we would start from the beginning and move forward, but we're actually going to go a little out of order just due to the timing of when this is coming out. This is going to be coming out the week of Christmas, so it makes a ton of sense to really kind of start the discussion regarding the actual event of the birth of Christ, where we have, like in Luke 2, where we're starting the angels appearing and them talking about the great joy that has come. So that's where we're going to start today. And the next time we'll go backwards and back forwards again, and it'll be a good time. We'll kind of get more into definitions, I think more so next time. We'll get into a little bit today, but really do some more heavy lifting with it next time. But for now, we'll be looking at Luke 2 and the great joy that comes in this very passage. How are you doing, Caleb?
Been a heck of a day. I am exhausted.
He's fine. Everything's fine.
So yeah, I initially had proposed this theme to Josh. Well, really more of a word study, but I was thinking about it earlier today, honestly. And I wanted to kind of talk about, right, why is the incarnation such a moment of joy? And it's not only, obviously, it's the coming of salvation. It's the fruition of the Old Testament. We're finally getting, basically what the entirety of human existence has led up to. Start that sentence over. We're getting the culmination of the Old Testament, the fruition of the prophets, and basically what the entirety of human existence has been building towards is the incarnation. As Michael Knowles says, it is the pivotal moment in history, and it's very true. But I want to kind of combine some thoughts that we've sort of glossed over, or at the very least talked about briefly in the past few weeks, namely the fact that God is so willing to give up perfection for us should be a source of joy to us. I know that sounds probably a little odd, but think about when you are in a constant relationship with someone. Some of the greatest moments of joy will be when they give up something for you, right? Because then you mean something to them. God gives up heaven for us. That should be an immense source of joy because of what he is willing to sacrifice. We focus a lot on the sacrifice of the resurrection, or of the crucifixion, rather. And we should, right? Because that was a great sacrifice. And then the resurrection gives us new life. Our faith is built upon that. But we never seem to recognize the sacrifice that God makes through incarnation. Because he doesn't appear as some sort of, he doesn't just appear as a full-grown man. He doesn't just, boom, incarnate. All right, I'm here as a full-grown man with the power and majesty of God. He could, but he doesn't. He could be born a prince and set up for himself an earthly kingdom, but he doesn't do that. He could be born in any number of circumstances or incarnate in any number of ways, but he chooses instead to give everything up and to be born where the animals sleep, to parents who have nothing. And that's the sacrifice of the incarnation. And so when the angels say, we bring you glad tidings of great joy, there is a lot packed into that statement. There is hey, this is the coming of God. This is Emmanuel. This is everything that you know as Jews. That's what this is. And so the hope of thousands of years, hundreds of generations has now come, and you get to bear witness to that. And not only do you get to bear witness to that, you get to understand what that means. You get to understand that means this is God sacrificing for us, taking on the form of a slave for us. That is immensely joyful.
Yeah, no, exactly. It is this great joy of the coming of the Savior, the very sacrifice that he makes. As Philippians 2 points out, that he humbles himself. I think I mentioned this in the Image of God series, that The image of God part talks about our status in relationship to God compared to the rest of creation. It's not something that we do, but it's something that we are. And an effective, the thing that we are does something, but it's not like it's your choices that you make are the things that determine your imaging. But to have the likeness of God as one hand, in terms of what we are, also comes with a standard of which calls us to be something greater than we actually tend to be. But as Paul points out, Jesus comes down in the likeness of man, which means he has lowered himself. So we're called up to, go up to a standard, and he has not lowered that standard, but he has humbled himself and went lower to a position where to be on the same playing field, as you will, as we are in some capacity, which is even then it's kind of hard to wrap our minds around, I guess, with the whole idea like incarnate Christ, you're God and you're man, and that's all in one person. But this beautiful thing that he has come is just this beautiful thing that has come in such a way to save us, identify with us, and to conquer for us and for his glory is just immensely beautiful thing, especially in light of the fact that as far as I remember, Kaylee, maybe you might have something to correct me on. Within the Jewish background leading up to the New Testament, there was this kind of like silence almost, this idea that God has in some way left Israel. Not that like he's like, stop being omnipotent or omnipresent, sorry, but that he kind of just left them because of the way they are. And that they've kind of like that they're in this moment of silence where they're still reaching out to the Lord, they're still serving religiously, they're still seeking to worship him, but there seems to be this distance between them and their king. They're in many depictions, their husband, when it talks about Israel being a adulterous spouse or like a child who is a disobedient child and all the different comparisons. And then you have in Luke 2, where these angels just appear and they're like, hey, yo, shepherd, what's up? Fun fact,
Well,
he's back.
yeah, it's kind of funny that you mentioned that. I was talking with a buddy earlier today. I think it was, might have been yesterday. I think it was today about John the Baptist and how that is paralleling the story of Israel and the coming Messiah, where you have Israel's disbelief causing God's silence until the coming of the Son. Well, Zechariah does not initially believe the angel when he is told that he will have a son. And then what happens? Zechariah is caused to fall silent until the Son comes, right? At which point he then experiences great joy and praises God. Right? So you get this theme of joy echoing throughout the nativity, I guess. Yeah. So throughout the nativity and throughout the whole narrative surrounding it, there's this anticipation that keeps building and building and building, right? You get Joseph receiving the dream, and you kind of like can stitch it together across the Gospels, where Matthew tells you the details of Joseph getting the dream, and Luke tells you the details of why they're going to Bethlehem, and Mark sets up John as prophesying his coming, and John talks about all of the pre-existent stuff that is so important to know leading up to finally this moment where it all just comes together across all four Gospels of boom, incarnate God.
Yeah.
I think we have to start. Well, I don't want to get too far ahead, so I want your thoughts on that first.
Yeah. I mean, I know the key passage that you messaged me about doing for today's episode, since it was a topic that you were hoping to get into, was Luke. But that's like a huge part of what John gets into, because John's four Gospels focus on the kingdom and the arrival of the king in like very similar, but also sometimes distinct ways. John treats it in many ways more like, okay, the temple has not been filled by God. God has not been filling his house, but now the temple has come in the form of a man, and God is dwelling in that man. And so like the body of Christ is being depicted as like the true temple, the temple that the Jews think they have that should be the house of God, but he has come down in something else instead. And that he has not just come down to be like present in a building, but he has come down in a human body within the one person and the two natures, that God has now come to walk among us, not just like manifest himself among us, but like he is here like in a physical way that is just like we are, and not just like a representation or a manifestation or a vision or all these things. This is him in flesh and blood and bone and all these things, that everything that we have is here and no longer in that temple, but his body is the temple. And it's this really cool thing that John plays into. They all play into this, but John really, really lays into this heavily. I guess that's kind of more of the thoughts I was having when you were saying that.
Yeah, and that kind of segues perfectly into what I was really leaning towards here, which is that our joy needs to be found in the incarnation. Our joy needs to be found in a very real event, in a very solid foundation, in a very specific moment. It's something that we can really latch onto and is tangible, just as the incarnation is. Something that we can look at and say, this is a very real source of joy. Joy extends beyond happiness. And that's something that we'll probably talk about in another episode. But joy really extends beyond just happiness, extends beyond feeling positive. There are moments in life where you are not going to feel well, you're not going to feel good, but you will still have joy. But generally, joy should cause you to have a more optimistic outlook. Joy and hope are very connected. There's a reason that joy is one of the fruit of the Spirit, and that it's surrounded by things that generally give you a much more positive outlook on life. Again, that's not to say you have to go around being all smiles all the time. You're allowed to have a bad moment here or there. Sometimes you can have a really bad moment. Jesus had plenty of his bad moments. Now, his were probably a little different than ours because, he's got that whole perfect God thing going for him.
And there's a betrayal for him that, like you were saying before, like there's stuff that he's gone through that we go through. And yet there's a layer of that too, where it's like a layer of where that is like what we go through, and a layer of like something I don't think we can truly fully understand. Like he was like, at first he was betrayed by Judas, knowing the entire time that Judas would betray him.
Yeah.
Whereas we don't always get that knowing, and he's walking with that person, and yet he still shows love. There's that level of like that, because of that knowledge that he has of what's going on, that there's like a level of like,
right,
we can identify with that. And there's also like, how could you ever let like that, like choose that? Like, and you realize like this incomparability of his love.
And his love and joy goes right along with that, right? When he's having these moments with the disciples where they're really bonding and they're really close, we have to remember that Judas is right there among with them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
He is experiencing the joy just as the others are, right? The other 11. And when Jesus sends out the 12, he sends out Judas. Judas goes and preaches the gospel. Judas goes and performs miracles. Joy is not something that disappears simply because we sin or because somebody sins against us. Joy is something that flows out of us at all times and is generally a symbol of Christ. It is a symbol of who Christ has called us to be. I feel like I keep needing to caveat this. I can make this the last time I do it. That doesn't mean you can never have a bad day. Christ had moments where he just had a bad day. You will have bad days. But what's important is when you have those bad days, you don't let it become who you are. You don't sit in that sin. Instead, you look back to the God who took on human flesh for you, and you say, I want to live like that. There will be times when I am tempted and I may succumb to temptation, but I want to live like that. There will be times when people hurt me in life, but I want to live like that. Joy is not, there's a song that I forced Josh to listen to because I was driving. It's We Are Messengers, Where the Joy Is. And there's a line in there that I really like. It's that joy is not a place, it's a disposition. That's very true. You're not going to achieve joy by reaching some circumstance in life. Joy will help you to reach places in life. I don't mean it's going to make you the next Warren Buffett. I mean that it will help you to be fulfilled in life. It will guide you towards God, because ultimately God is the source of joy. So if you use joy and you have joy and you keep following joy, you will follow it back to the source, God. So I think the important thing here to recognize in Luke 2 is every angle at which we can approach joy. We can approach joy as we've been talking about this, as this real event of the incarnation, or as Josh was talking about, where God is finally breaking his silence and now there is joy. We have communion with God once more. Whatever joy looks like, because it simultaneously is and is not different for each person. What joy may look like to you is somewhat different than what it might look like to me, but ultimately it still reflects God. God is still seen through it. So there is that consistency of God is in joy and joy is in God. However, I may take joy in spending time with my daughter. That can be a source of joy. Now, it'd be a little weird if Josh also took joy in spending time with my daughter. There are differences in the ways that we perceive or we express and understand joy. That's how I want to phrase it, that we express and understand joy. Joy is consistent. Our understanding and perception of it is different. We need to examine, and we will going forward in the next couple episodes, Lord willing, what exactly is joy and how do we have it in our lives. I make it a point to, whenever I'm around other human beings, to keep an upbeat demeanor. Now, that was not always true in my life. Josh can attest, high school that was certainly not true. I was a very different person years ago. And in many ways, I still see that person. But no longer am I just the guy who sits on his computer sulking in the corner. Now I am, and this is not to toot my own horn, because it's only because of God that I am like this, and only because of what he has done. Now I am the person to volunteer to do things, to crack a joke, to make somebody smile. My goal when working is, if I can make your day a little bit better, I will have done my job. Not what they're necessarily paying me to do. That's not my job. Right? That's just something that I use as a means to actually do my job. Joy is a job. Again, we'll get into that in future parts. We will get into what is joy, how to express joy. And I realize I'm kind of rambling now, but it's 10:30 at night, so leave me alone. All of this joy that we experience is anchored in the good news of great joy. Christ has come. God has come. Emmanuel.
Yeah, and I think I want to read. I guess we're gonna get a whole bunch of this stuff in the next like 2-ish episodes. We'll probably do like a Hebrew episode and a Greek episode, kind of like covered all together. But if I could quote John Hastings from 1911, this is like 20th century dictionary. So I think it was really well put together. This statement he says, where he's comparing at least some of the Hebrew words, and he says is similar and true of the New Testament words. But in general, it may be said that they all include not only a mental emotion, but some outward expression of this, such as shouting, singing, leaping, dancing, sometimes with the accompaniment of musical instruments. Talking about joy as this thing is like, it is not just a state of emotion, but it is an expression of that very thing that you feel. I think what's interesting is in the little research I did for this episode specifically, is that interestingly enough, the word joy and happy before the 20th and 19th century were used interchangeably because they were tied together with the whole idea of expressing that thing that you feel inside. And it wasn't just like something you feel, but it was just an expression tied to it. And it was post 20th century that we started to put a differentiation between the emotion and the expression of those things. This going to be interesting when we get into the Greek and Hebrew. We're going to see that they really tie into this whole idea of there is this rejoicing of the thing that you do because of the thing that you feel. And this call to always be rejoicing, because joy and rejoicing will produce happiness because you are rejoicing over the very thing that God has done. And in this case, if I could just take that little background information and put it into Luke 2, oh man, let's look at this. Verse 8 through 12, just to get a paragraph in, and then we can go before and after. And there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people." If I had to throw that in, great rejoicing, great expression of excitement of these things, tied into what Caleb was just saying, the idea of taking joy in the incarnation, being joyful and expressing that, and that it comes out in the way we are doing things. Because he says, "Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger." I mean, Caleb, just to tie that in with that Hastings comment to even like looking back on both of us in high school. I remember our pastor, actually when he was a youth pastor, and then our previous pastor before him, before he moved on to overseeing a lot of the mission branches for New York, that they would talk about seeing the joy of the Lord in people. And that never really kind of made sense. He was like, okay, what do you mean by that? The idea of seeing the joy of the Lord, but the idea that you're taking joy and you're rejoicing over the things of the Lord and the things that he has done, such as the incarnation. And, even looking back on, as you were just saying, with your life and my life in high school, there were a lot of people who knew by words that we professed Christianity. I have a hard time really looking back and saying people saw that we had the joy of the Lord in us, because we were,
Amen.
at least I know I was, definitely entrenched in some other stuff that was taking more of my focus than the joy of the Lord. The rejoicing of who Christ is.
That's a polite way of putting it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
The idea of
it
there's
is.
that expression is not like you're saving face. It's not like you're faking it, but the idea of being joyful is like love. We're commanded to rejoice. We're called to rejoice. We're told to rejoice. We're told to be joyful. We're told to love. We're told to all these things. And it's that decision of, okay, are we going to praise the Lord in all things and take joy in what he has done? Or are we going to let something else keep our focus off that, keep our focus off of the joy of, for instance, right here, the incarnation, and therefore keep us in a state of, how about, for instance, pessimism? I know that's the best example, but just using that for now. Like, are we going to maybe like optimistic, everything's bubbly and hoo ha? Like, you can still be a
Well,
realist. I am,
right,
but
but
also, not being.
there should be this overall, I'm going to use a really gross, like Gen Z term, positive vibe that you put out. I know,
Don't remind me that I'm Gen Z.
I know, Josh. We are unfortunately anchored and tethered into this generation.
I love you, Gen Z. I love all gods. I love all people. And I love, especially. No, I'm not going to refer. Let me start this over. I love all of you. I do, especially since I am also Gen Z. But I really hate our vocabulary. I really, really, really do. Let's just keep the good stuff. Let's trash the bad stuff.
No, there should be a sort of energy about you, right? Like something that something that people look at you and just go, there's something different in a good way, right? Of like, no matter what happens, this person is always ready and willing to go and do what needs to be done. You know, I had a coworker ask me, and again, this is not to toot my own horn, and I know it wasn't me because I responded way too quickly, with like the perfect answer. So it was not me because I would have messed it up. But it was somebody asked, she's like, why are you always just like so happy and ready to go? And I just like, it's the joy of the Lord. And I kept going. And then it kind of clicked to my head like 30 seconds later. I was like, huh. That wasn't me that answered that question. It was through me, but it was not me.
Was that weird thing of like, there could be some people could really easily take to say, oh, so it's just a state of mind. And it's like, okay, ish. I mean, I
It's
get why.
expressed through the state of mind.
Right. So I get how you're getting to that conclusion, but it's not just a mere state of the mind, it's the foundation of what that is taking place in. Because there's people who might be happy or joyful about things that are going to decimate or fall apart later. That there is
Right.
no foundation. But the foundation of the incarnation right here, let's just talk about that one again. The incarnation as the foundation, where we have that Jesus Christ came down as a babe in that manger, humbling himself, and then lives out his entire life in ministry, establishing the kingdom of God, and also does the saving work on the cross and rises. That is a joy that cannot go away because that is a thing that is not going to shake. It's not going to be gone. It's there. One, based on the things we believe. But also, two, we have actual evidence to back it, which means we know it's not like just blind faith and joy. It's like a legit thing that has happened. And then we take joy and excitement and we boast in the Lord for what he has done because he actually has done this. And it's not just something that we're like, we kind of build ourselves off of and then it will crumble later. I remember, I think it was a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, I got to teach at our youth for a youth event that we did. And they were talking about identity. And it was unfortunate that earlier that day that they were one person that was a guest speaker kind of talked about identity, and didn't take the opportunity to talk about Christ as the foundation of that identity and saying like how your identity could be all these things that you want it to be. And once you kind of fixate on that, it's yours. It's not going to be taken. And it was like, so I kind of very kindly basically said that was wrong. And it was like, all those things can change. Your passions will change. Your desires will change. Your focuses will change. The circumstances in your life will change. Like you may go from a state of being in a great wealthy position to a really poor position or vice versa. Or you might be like in one spot. You might be in a position where you don't keep moving. You're just there. Like you, for some reason, like hit that glass ceiling or it feels like you have all these different things. But that one thing of who Christ isn't changing. That is a foundation that will never change. And especially if we think about that as the foundation of identity, foundation of this case, joy, that thing that we rejoice in. That is something you can rejoice in every single day and it will never go away. It is not something that will cease to be true because one, it's historically a thing that's happened. And two, because God has made it so very clear that he does not change. and that this is a thing that he has done for humanity retroactively and progressively from the moment that he was born. For those that all the Old Testament people were looking forward to, and all the things that we as Christians can look back onto, and everything in between and beyond. That will not change. That is a thing that will be the foundation forever. And it is that foundation that is also the passageway. It is through Christ that we can be able to be brought back into Eden, into that new creation. And that is a joy that will not change. That is a foundation that will not go away. But like your job, if your joy isn't your job, I'm glad you love your job, but that will change. You may eventually hate your job. You may lose your job. You may retire. Then what? What is left? Where is that foundation? Where is that consistent foundation that will never go?
Right.
Well, we've talked a lot about the passage. Caleb, do you want to say anything about the passage itself and get into it?
I mean, we can. I feel like that's kind of the point that I was looking to make. I feel like just this little portion here, right, 8 to 12 is pretty, or really even shorter than that. But 8 to 12 is the full declaration. I feel like that is kind of the gist that I always took away from it. This is a very real, this is like almost in the sense like the physical incarnation of joy. Just the hope and promise of all of humanity in the most innocent, pure, beautiful, wonderful of packages. That to me is, if you know me, you know I love babies. And so that idea to me is like perfect joy.
So I know we said we're going to save some of this for the Greek episode, but I was kind of perusing through
You're going to
BDAG.
pull up Greek.
So this is, the root of it is kara, or in this case, I guess karan.
Yeah.
Or karan is the morphology of it. But looking at the BDAG, just to kind of like tie into what the angel is saying here, you have the experience of gladness, as we kind of talked about. There's this experience thing you go through, but then also this expression thing. But there are number 2, A through C, like I said, like their subpoints. I think this is kind of really cool. A person or thing that causes joy, and it gives some specific caveats. A person as a source of joy, of an event that calls forth joy, of a festive dinner or banquet. That this usage is talking that this is the source for joy.
Right.
That the angel, like we're saying, yes, I think it's kind of implied there already, but just knowing that that's how the word can be used is this idea of like, here is the source of joy.
Yeah.
Present.
Yeah. And I like how that kind of laid it out, because it's using all of these different terms for sort of like a celebration almost.
Yeah.
And then you get in verses 13 through 14, the celebration, right? Like you get the moment of, of joy on earth, and then joy in heaven as well, right? Where there's rejoicing of heaven meeting earth, both in the incarnation and now in the heavenly hosts singing in the skies. That is those two events side by side, both heaven meeting earth, one celebrating the other one, the celebrated, one the source of joy, the other one the rejoicing. And how they're so intertwined.
I think what's so interesting too is that the angels are rejoicing on our behalf. They're rejoicing about something like they don't, if you really think about it, this is not their world. Like it's not like it's their people, but they have seen it as like, okay, they have seen it as that there is this, there's supposed to be this family between the earthly, the heavenly, and Yahweh. There's supposed to be this relationship between all three. That this is like the Father, Yahweh's the Father, and then we're his two kinds of children. And it's like they're rejoicing that the one who will come to restore the very thing that was broken, that our other brother that has now been completely forsaken, aka the devil and his followers, have tried to destroy. Now here's the one who's going to bring it all back and restore that family. And they're rejoicing on our behalf. Like it's not like they're being saved. It's not like their other heavenly hosts who have rebelled are being saved. They're rejoicing over the fact that the Christ has come to save humanity, which Jesus even talks about, that those who repent, the angels in heaven rejoice.
I was just going to bring that passage up.
Like that is something like they don't have to be doing that, but they take joy in them.
Yeah.
And that is also a humbling thing, because it's not like they created us. It's not like they spawned us. It's not like that they necessarily communicate with all of us.
No, but it's kind of, and this is going to be an analogy that borders on heresy.
Of course.
Which is the best kind of analogy. It's kind of like, sibling rejoicing for their sibling, which again is not a perfect analogy by any means, but it's like, let's say, Josh, your sister, when she graduates college, Lord willing, you will rejoice for her. That is a cause for celebration. It doesn't actually help you in any way, but you're still going to rejoice for her.
Yeah. And another thing is kind of a side thing, but like, I think some people mistake. So some people take the whole, the prophetic visions and say, wow, look how weird spiritual beings are. That's why they're freaked out here. It's like, no, there has been this silence of sorts. God has not been dwelling with Israel, but now you have angels, boom, in the sky, and they're lighting up the heavens. What's another word for angels used in the Old Testament and the New Testament? Stars. The night has lit up. If we were to tie this back to Genesis 1 with our other videos, stars are put in the domain of darkness, which was talked about as, or not described as Tov. It was described as, it is left Tovless. It's kind of like Ra. If it's not Tov, it's Ra. It's just kind of how it works. Not evil, just not desirable. But the lights and the sun and the moon, they light up the time that they're supposed to, whether it be daytime or nighttime. And the stars take their place in nighttime. Well, now the stars are lighting up the sky, so much so because the angelic hosts are there celebrating that the Christ has come. And what are they following? The Magi, they're following the brightest star over top of where the Christ is. Like, look, it could be that could be an actual star. I'm not opposed to that. I wouldn't be surprised if also like there was something angelic happening and like, boom, here, like big post sign, like, look right here, here it is. Here he is.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me if it was both and in some capacity, because they are found lighting up the sky, rejoicing. There is no silent night happening here. There is no silent night at all happening here.
Which is really funny.
Especially when you send the shepherds into the town.
That song. Yeah. We should make a parody of that song, of Silent Night, where it's like what is actually happening.
Yeah.
Where nothing is calm, but there is a lot of bright. That's a bunch of smelly dudes walking through town screaming.
Next year's live stream will have that as our intro song parody. But man, they're rejoicing. I think it's so cool that they're also rejoicing. And this is a demonstration of what rejoicing looks like. Like, it just lights up the dark places, whether they be like, in their case, a literal dark place or a theologically dark place. The joy of the Lord lights up, and it's so clear what the rejoicing is for, because it just can't be shown in any other way. It can't be said in any other way because of the Christ and what he has done and what he is doing, I guess you could say, still today. But that joy, as you were saying, in the incarnation, that Christ has come. Did you have any other thoughts? I kind of went off on a tangent there.
No, you're good. I think that's about all I had.
All right. Do you want me to close or do you want to close? Well, correction. Do you want to stumble through closing or do you want me to close?
We'd like to thank you all so very much for watching as Josh continues to insult me. I am a professional. I am very good at my job. With that said, please let us know down in the comments below your thoughts on Luke 2 and the joy that we must anchor ourselves in, the joy that we fix our hope, our peace, our love, and our lives in. We'd love to hear from you down there. And fun fact, actually, if you want to see the heavenly hosts all appear in the sky singing Alleluia, you should hit the subscribe and like button, because that actually happens when you do. They just pop up right there, right in front of you, and proclaim to you good news that more videos will be coming.
Did that happen to you when you subscribed before you joined?
Yes, it did, actually. We'd like to thank you all so much for watching. We really do appreciate it, and Merry Christmas.